Welcome to Farnborough 86. Every 2 years, the eyes of the aviation world turn to this airfield in southern England. 1986 is special. Well over 30 planes are putting in their first appearance this year. We have what promises to be a classic confrontation between two fighter planes, both straining to be Europe's choice for the 1990s. There's a plane that can be turned into a firefighting aircraft in 2 hours. A plane with foldable wings, and an interesting new idea in propellers. There are hundreds of exhibitors here displaying almost anything connected with aviation. At Farnborough, you might expect to order anything from a tube of glue to the biggest aeroplane in the world. For training young pilots, this year's Farnborough has brought together a number of little two-seater trainers that do just that job. They showed their paces with some lively flying displays. Trago Mills from Cornwall in southwest England. The Firecracker, simulating the handling of a fast jet. The Firefly, made entirely of glass-reinforced plastics. And from Switzerland, the Bravo, 150 of them already sold to 7 countries. We promised you the biggest aircraft in the world, and here it is, the huge Russian Antonov with its 24 wheels. It needs them because it's also the world's heaviest plane. A year ago, it broke 21 records for payloads. We take our leave of it with an unusual view through the observation bubble of the Optica. At the other end of the scale, there's a first appearance from Britain's newest light aircraft, the Super 2. The Freelance. It can fold its wings in less than a minute to save hangar space and be easily hidden from view in a military situation. It's another newcomer to Farnborough. The Microjet comes from France. In spite of its small size, it has room for bombs, rockets, or gun pods. China is a first-time visitor to the air show this year, and as you can see, they've brought with them a decorative touch that's most unusual among all the technology.
Development, manufacturing, and product support.
British Aerospace is rightly proud of its large range of different aircraft. Perhaps that's why they decided to bring out their planes in the form of this family outing along the runway. But after this stately procession, the displays began in earnest, and we bring you 3 of the most spectacular of them. To produce an all-weather combat aircraft, British Aerospace teamed up with Germany and Italy in Europe's biggest collaboration program. Royal Air Force crews have won major trophies with it in the last 2 years against the best opposition from the United States Air Force, the plane, the Tornado. Harrier jump jet was so successful that the Royal Navy asked for a version especially for use at sea. The result is a plane that operates from cruisers of the Invincible class, the Sea Harrier. The Hawk is best known as the plane flown by the Red Arrow's aerobatic team. But the Royal Air Force use it as a transonic jet trainer. They say that after 250,000 hours of flying, it has a safety record unequaled by any other jet trainer.
One of the most successful collaborative programs that ever been.
British Aerospace is competing with France and Germany to get funding for a space plane. The Duke of Edinburgh was shown their exhibit by Sir Austin Pearce, chairman of the company. British Aerospace is offering a whole new range of space hardware. Among them is the horizontal takeoff and landing craft, HOTOL. It's reusable, and it could take off and land on conventional runways. The German Sänger 2 is a two-stage vehicle. It could take off and land at European airports, and it could be used up to 100 times. An Ariane rocket would put the French Hermes into orbit. The Hermes is likely to be the first space plane into the air, so the general feeling is it will win Europe's financial support. The French contingent here at Farnborough comes almost entirely from the firm of Dassault Breguet. Their Mirage 2000 entered service with the French Armed Forces 2 years ago. Now a scaled-up version, the 4000, has been developed as a private venture by French industry. Its display shows that this 20-ton version can still be thrown around the sky.
passenger aircraft is comparable to, sorry, just watching our friend on the runway backing down to where he's supposed to be. Supposed to be what? He hasn't done that before. Supposed to be. Supposed to be what? He hasn't done that before.
Another version, the F-1CR, is a reconnaissance aircraft, which is why it has cameras and infrared sensors. And the letter R in its designation means it can be refueled in the air. To this group also comes from the French stable of Dassault Breguet, but it's been developed and produced in cooperation with Dornier of Germany. The turnaround time between flights is only 6 minutes, and it's being used for training young pilots to make the transition to modern combat aircraft. The Alpha Jet.
The flying qualities to get allowed to run. About that 0426.
It's not often that an air show generates public excitement even before it opens. But for weeks, Farnborough has been talked about in terms of a duel in the sky. At its center is the most intense fighter battle for many years. Here's one of the contenders, France's Rafale. 4 European countries, Britain, Germany, Italy and Spain, have agreed on the fighter plane they would like for the 1990s. But so far, the Eurofighter only exists as a model. A test bed for the real thing is Britain's EAP. Both craft were ready only weeks before Farnborough opened. The Rafale comes from the French firm Dassault Breguet, who produced the Mirage. This piece of film shows part of Rafale's first flight on the 4th of July. The plane makes considerable use of carbon fiber in its wings and fuselage, and its aim is to show the success of the technology that would go into an operational version in 1987. Its rival comes from British Aerospace. Britain's Ministry of Defence joined with industry in what they called an experimental aircraft program. And somehow the initials, EAP, have stuck. Like the Rafale, it's regarded as a flying test bed for the real thing. This is from a film of its first flight on the 8th of August. And now, here at Farnborough, it's seconds out. No weapons, no radar. Now it's just pilot to pilot and plane to plane. First off the mark, France's Rafale, contender for the title of Europe's fighter plane for the 1990s.
get that 2 instance heat. 16 on and on.
C'est bon, ça fait 2 minutes et demie.
Oui. 2.5.
Ouais, c'est bon, franchement.
Are you taking to the rest of the
15 seconds for the full 360 and pulling 9G. Falcons have been delivered worldwide. They're registered in 64 countries. It's by 39 air forces or state organizations among other airmen. 3 of these Falcon 900s currently flying.
And now in direct competition, the EAP from British Aerospace, also laying claim to be Europe's fighter plane into the 21st century. is the EAP, Britain's answer to the French Rafale. In a fly-by-wire aircraft, computers act as the pilot's guardian angel. They take note of his demands and adapt them to give an ideal response to all flight conditions. In a cockpit sequence that was recorded earlier this year, test pilot Gordon Corr shows how the Airbus 300 reacts to a classic stall maneuver.
I'm simply pulling the nose up gently. We're coming towards the high alpha range. The thrust is going on automatically. I simply hold full up elevator on the controls, and the system does all the work for me. The noise that you may hear in the background is the conventional A300 stall warning. If I now release the stick, hands off, now the airplane recovers without any assistance.
The Airbus family is a prime example of something that crops up again and again at Farnborough, collaboration between nations. The Airbus family has been developed jointly by Britain, Belgium, France, Germany, the Netherlands and Spain. And now, out on the runway, the Airbus 300 begins its display. There were only two big aircraft operating an early warning system this year at Farnborough. Boeing's AWACS, the only American plane in the show, and the Nimrod from British Aerospace. This super guppy didn't appear on the menu officially, but we thought you'd like to see it anyway. Air Italia's G222 takes only a couple of hours to convert to a firefighting plane. The water boom is rigged on the tail, which must be unique. Three versions of the Italian Air Macchi are on show at Farnborough this year. The latest made its maiden flight only last December. It's a light attack aircraft, and two of them gave us a typically racy Italian display.
There we go. airport section, the aircraft is moving downwards. Multi-tail, big turn to the 2.
Regulatory 3, 2.
Now we're going in on the
These new prop fans could power the medium-size airliners of the future. The gas turbine core turns the two propeller hubs in opposite directions. Prop fans could save up to 30% in fuel and 10% in costs. Boeing, General Electric, and McDonnell Douglas all think they could be in service by 1992. This light attack aircraft is the AMX. It's the result of an unusual international partnership, Italy and Brazil. And that brings us to the end of the solo flying for this year. But Farnborough would not be Farnborough without its traditional aerial acrobatics from the Red Arrows.